if to the extent I would comment on the earlier panel, I think there was a comment a little bit like, well, Alipay is just embedding in New York City taxis as addressing the tourists. Alipay has grand ambitions in the United States. I agree 100% with Dan that each market has its unique.
Do they admit that? I'm not sure they admit that, but you think that's they eventually want to be a big player in payments.
I think there's no doubt about that.
What makes you say that?
I'm sure Dan and I both have had conversations with people at both those companies, and I think this is a large economy. They want growth. They think about. Alipay in particular has been incredibly strategic about making investments and stitching together. They're the largest shareholder in Paytm. They're the largest shareholder in can't remember the payment network in Indonesia. And they're in some ways they're building their own version of an interoperable payment network, but closed to their world.
Yeah.
It's exploration of central bank digital currency. For China, it's not just about developing its own ECNY. It's also about dominating the underlying CBDC technology in the same way they've done with 5G technology, so they can be a major exporter of CBDC infrastructure to countries around the world that desire to have their own central bank digital currency, but don't have the wherewithal to build the core technology from scratch. And so we'll import Chinese-based CBDC technology. So it's going to be CBDC in a box provided to you by the People's Bank of China. And so that, and for countries that may wish to avoid sanctions, whether they be Venezuela or Cuba or other countries. CBDC is absolutely being seen as a form of statecraft by countries that have been subject to Western sanctions in the past and wish to have a way to avoid that in the future.
Welcome to the Crypto Teacher. And I come back with that video just to make you think. We have Brad Garlinghouse on WeChat and Alipay. And guys, we know the digital yuan is now embedded in those apps. Majority everything they need is already in WeChat and Alipay. And once they integrate this with the BRICS nations, the Belt and Road, and start airdropping this free money. Remember, we stayed on the fiat system. It would be impossible for the yuan to overtake the United States World Reserve currency because there's so many dollars out there. But now, since we're moving over to a digital economy, and we know that China devalues their currency on purpose, which in return helps their economy. But what are we going through right now? This whole global economy is going through hyper-deflation, which is going to help China even more once the digital yuan gets embedded in the emerging markets. And also what's very important is that the PayPal CEO speaks about how easy it is to switch the actual emerging markets over to the fourth industrial revolution than it is when it comes to the West. And we see in the West, they're moving over in phases to the fourth industrial revolution because they know some things we're not going to go for. That's the reason why they have to move in phases. Bring in different distractions. The C word, change American behavior, without them even understanding that their behavior changed. And this is why the NWO uses think tanks. It's very important to understand that. They plan out your life. And speaking of distractions, we had Biden on 60 Minutes going over Taiwan. And you guys know I've been over Taiwan thousands of times. Way before anyone has been talking about it. Way before it's been in the media. Because Taiwan is that signal that the drums are beating. And we know they need WW3 in order to bring in the new world reserve currency. But don't forget the Anthony Sutton videos. Don't forget my New World Order book. It was all planned from the beginning. And then we also have Biden on inflation. And this tells you how dumbed down Americans are, because everybody should be irate on what he said about 8% inflation. We know this is all scripted, but just to get away with a comment that he made is absolutely amazing. I don't care who you are. We know that Fed and Congress created all this inflation because they did all this money printing. But we know the reason why. To bring in the fourth industrial revolution and the rise of China and the fall of America to Babylon. While the robots, algorithms, and drones take over the economy, pay each other with crypto, and the sheep go inside the metaverse. And remember, the crypto teacher told you, because he knows when it comes to the New World Order, it's all planned out. You have a wonderful day.
But I've used WeChat Pay and Ali and have spent time with their respective CEOs and know the system well. So first of all, I would make that same decision that we made over again, in complete hindsight, again and again. I think a lot of people want to extrapolate the Chinese experience to other markets, but you have to remember, they came from a completely different place. First of all, they did not have an embedded point of sale system in place, so very few of the merchants accepted credit cards. They didn't have really a large credit system in place, and so QR codes came naturally. And by the way, Ali and WeChat Pay battle for those merchants. Don't assume that they're profitable on that, because they are battling for market share inside China right now. And so every country, this is the fascinating thing about payments, is different. Germany, Japan, very different thoughts about credit than we have here in the U.S. China came from, leapfrog. You look at Africa, and it's a little like telephony. They didn't go from no phones to wireline to wireless. They just leapt right to wireless. Same thing's happening in digital payment. You look at Kenya and others. I forget, something like 40% of the GDP is moved through M-Pesa. So every country is different, and as when we look at the world, we don't look at a cookie cutter approach at all. We look at country by country. What is the right value proposition to put out into that marketplace? And so I think the Chinese market is probably the most developed market in the world around digital payments. To your point, doesn't matter where you go, you really don't use cash. You go into a lot of the stores, things like shopping carts, they don't even know what that is, because they're just scanning and having it delivered.
Yeah.
There's no checkout. There's things like that. So it's a very different environment, but they have density in their cities, and it's.
I was thinking about Andrew saying that he didn't know how to tip, right, because he had no cash. But in China, right, they all just pull out their phone and give you their QR codes.
And by the way, that's a simple and easy thing for us to do in this country too. QR codes is a really easy thing to do for tipping for very small businesses, but we have an entrenched point of sale system here. It's going to be very different in the U.S. than China.
This morning, here's what he said.
We agree with what we signed on to a long time ago, and that there's a one China policy, and Taiwan makes their own judgments about their independence. We are not moving, we're not encouraging their being independent. That's their decision.
But would U.S. forces defend the island?
Yes, if in fact there was an unprecedented attack. Well, first of all, let's put this in perspective. Inflation rate month to month was just an inch, hardly at all.
You're not arguing that 8.3 is good news.
No, I'm not saying it is good news, but it was 8.2 or 8.2 before. I mean, it's not. Maybe I can make it sound like all of a sudden, my God, it went to 8.2%. It's
the highest inflation rate, Mr. President, in 40 years.
I got that, but guess what we are? We're in a position where, for the last several months, it hasn't spiked. It is just barely. It's been basically even.
More than the. Joining us right now is Jay Clayton, who's the former SEC chairman, also a CNBC contributor. Jay, you watched 60 Minutes last night. Your reaction to what President Biden had to say?
Well, look, on the one hand, he's right in that focusing on inflation is probably one of the most key things for Main Street America. But people don't pay inflation, they pay prices. And we should actually start talking in terms of prices. If you look at, let's just use simple numbers. If you look at inflation being 10% over 1 year, going from paying 100 to paying 110, if it comes down to 5% the next year, year on year, you're still paying 115 and change. Prices are still going up. People are focused on prices. So, look, some leading indicators on this, or some important indicators on this. Average household spending is going up, $400 to $500 a month. That's roughly $5,000 to $6,000 a year. That hurts. Mortgages, $500,000 mortgage is going up by $1,000, $1,000 a month. That's going to have an impact on prices. I think we should, when we communicate to the American public about economics, We should go with things they understand, like prices.
We're going to a different economy, and we're going to be learning more about that as we go. But clearly, we're learning that things can be done from remote locations. We're learning that technology can replace people even more than we thought.
We're not going back to the same economy. We're recovering, but to a different economy, and it'll be one that is more leveraged to technology. And I worry that that is going to make it even more difficult than it was for many workers.
In Silicon Valley, and my friends who work in technology know that what we did to the manufacturing workers, we are now going to do to the retail workers, the call center workers, the fast food workers, the truck drivers, and then even bookkeepers, accountants, insurance agents, lawyers, and on through the economy. So what happened to the manufacturing workers is a very clear sign.
This effort. And China has big plans for this. They intend to seed their digital yuan into the global environment by giving it away to visitors at next winter's Olympics. When they arrive at the airport, they're going to get yuan digital wallets. They're going to receive digital yuan. They're going to use it throughout their visits to Beijing, and then they're going to take it back to their home countries. They see this as a huge advantage. Why? Because who controls the underlying protocols, who controls the underlying standards of the future of money will control the future of money.
Most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation to come. Steve Jobs. And guys, you know I truly believe in this. When you look at the New World Order, they're the storytellers. And that's the reason why I wrote my New World Order book. But guys, now it's time to change the current generation. And I wrote 3 kids' books. You know I love the Trinity because I understand the power that's in it. So I have 3 books. We have an opportunity to change the generation, to educate, not just me, but I want to show you that I take action on a daily basis. And I want you to take action on a daily basis. Whether it's your job, whether it's in your community, we have an opportunity right now to educate the masses. I posted this on my Twitter account. Please share, but this is a short clip of the 3 books. There's going to be a clothing line and action figures. Please get these books for your kids, nephews, cousins, friends, so therefore we can start the re-education now. Because as we see, the 4th Industrial Revolution foundation is definitely here. Robots, algorithms, drones, taking humanity out the picture. We have to re-educate. But let's get into the video.
Part 1. King Joshua and Drama Tam save the village. Part 2. King Joshua and Drama Tam save New York. From COVID Stories 3. Part 3. King Joshua and Drama Tam goes to China.
It's mandatory to get part 1, part 2, and part 3 of this series. It's time to re-educate Generation Z.